me or slays me, I think the King James says, even though God slays me, I will come forth as gold. What an attitude. In spite of everything that he went, what an attitude. And Paul had a similar attitude. I can do all things through Christ, which strengthens me. So there's some good accounts of the storms in Paul's life. Acts 9, Acts chapter 20, Acts chapter 27. Take a look at them. And, but the point is very clear. Our storms, Paul's storms, often come in our path of obedience. When you're serving God, yea, all who shall live godly will suffer persecution. So don't be surprised. Don't get all upset and angry and scratch your head and say, well, I don't know why I have to go. No, expect it. That's what the Bible is very clear. 2 Timothy. Expect it. You will suffer. And a former young man in the congregation where I used to preach, that's what he posted on his own blog site. His whole article was about how his conviction is, if that you never suffer, you're not a Christian. That's a pretty bold claim to state, but that's what he said. You can't be a Christian, he said, and not suffer. I tend to agree with him. So storms often come in the path of obedience. And I think Paul is a good example. How about when I was in Sunday school, I loved the story. I can just see it and I remember the old flannel graphs and all the story of Daniel and the 3 Hebrew children. I love that story. That story made a big impact on me when I was younger. Daniel chapter 3. You know, Nebuchadnezzar is going to erect this 90-foot tall statue, and everybody, when you hear the trump, when you hear all these musical instruments playing, buddy, you better bow down and you better worship, you know, this God that they set up. Can you imagine a 90-foot God? Well, the 3 Hebrew children and Daniel said, listen, it ain't happening. We ain't doing it. Listen, king, we will not bow to your God. And so what they do then, they cranked up the furnace. How many times hotter? 7. I love that story. When you talk about a storm, you talk about being thrown into a fiery furnace 7 times hotter than normal. And then you tell the king, the man whose life is in your hand, you looking dead at him and say, listen, we will not bow to your God. But that's faith. That's courage. That's not some limp-wristed, weak-kneed, yellow-bellied sucker. That's great faith in their God. I love that story. Man, and you can respect that. See, I can't respect somebody who can't even get out of bed on Sunday morning and be in the assembly of the saints. What is wrong with people? Man. All right. Storms often come in the path of obedience. When you're doing what's right, you're serving God, you will suffer. Expect it. It's coming. You will suffer. Now, it's interesting. I just want to make this last point and then I want to move on. It seems that sometimes our storms, the storms of life, are greater than just a normal storm. You realize that there are Christian people who suffer more than the ungodly and the wicked? Have you noticed that? And that's why people lose their faith. That's why people just walk away from the church and they just walk away from God. Because it just, humanly speaking, it makes no sense. God doesn't make sense. The Bible doesn't make sense. How can a God-loving, kind, merciful, gracious God allow these people to suffer time and time and time again, and yet somebody out in the world living like the devil. They never seem to have one care in the world. Does that happen? All the time. I'm telling you, the storms of life often come in the path of obedience. Number two, storms, and I see it in this story because of what we just read. Storms oftentimes makes Jesus appear that he doesn't care. Now, who in their right mind would ever say, well, Jesus doesn't care, or Jesus doesn't love me? But you know there are people who say that. Well, God doesn't love me. God doesn't love me. Church don't care for me. They don't love me. And it seems that in this particular scene, if I'm understanding it correctly, this is where the disciples seem to be, because this fierce, raging storm, water is filling up in the boat, and they're afraid. And they sit there. Look at verse 38. Look at verse 38. But he was in the stern. He's in the back of the boat. He's sleeping. And they woke him and they said, Teacher! Teacher! Master! Don't you care? We're perishing! I mean, listen, God is in the house. Jesus is in the boat, and you're saying, listen, we're drowning here. We're dying, and you're asleep. See, and that's exactly how people think. Sometimes, because of all the storms, all the problem and the heartache and the sorrow that people have to endure in this life, it appears, it seems that Jesus doesn't care. And that's how people think. And I'm here to tell you that's not true. That's not true. And we know that. But for these expert fishermen, for these men, that's exactly what Jesus, don't you care? We're drowning here. We're dying. And you're sleeping. Carest thou not that we perish? And sometimes, the longer I live, and you talk to people, and you try to be empathetic, and you try to understand and care and love people and just help them, because people have a lot of problems, if you haven't figured that out. Their cry here, and at least Mark 4, that's actually why I prefer to the other accounts, but their cry here, they're saying, and they're waking Jesus up, and in their fear, it seems, and what I learned from the original Greek text is, this is almost a cry, or it's a feeling of resentment, they're confused about Jesus's apparent indifference. And what's interesting here is when it says he slept, and the word he is very emphatic in the original. He slept. And what the writer, Mark's doing here, it's showing a contrast. This was so cool when I learned this. Mark, all he is trying to do, he is trying to show this contrast between the peace and the calmness of Jesus to their fear and panic. How many have ever had a panic attack here? It's a very real disorder, absolutely. You know, I am so sympathetic, and so it's unfortunate, but that's the painful reality. Listen, people have phobias. People are fearful. In more psychological term, it's called panic disorders. It's very real, and people have them. This is why we have psychiatrists and psychologists, and those are good fields of study, and we need those people because they can help. Okay. That's the emphasis here, even from the original. There's this contrast between the calmness, the peace of Jesus, as contrasted to their fear.